When Martha Reeves walked into the depot for her first day of work, the room went quiet for a moment. She was wearing an old camouflage jacket, the kind soldiers wear, and heavy boots that looked like they had been through a lot. Her short brown hair was neatly tied back, and there was something sharp and steady about her eyes. She didn't look like most people who worked there. Everyone else was dressed casually. Jeans, shirts, and sneakers, but Martha looked like she had just walked out of a military base. Most of the workers stared for a few seconds, then went back to what they were doing. Some whispered, some chuckled quietly. The new lady in camo seemed odd to them, who still wore army clothes to a civilian job. The depot was a busy logistics center, full of loud machines, boxes stacked to the ceiling, and workers shouting over the sound of forklifts. It was not the kind of place where anyone cared about neat uniforms or strict discipline. But Martha, she moved differently. Her steps were measured, her back straight, her face calm. She looked like she had already seen 100 harder places than this one. The supervisor, Mr. Henson, handed her a clipboard and said, "You'll be helping with supply checks and inventory management." "Yes, sir," Martha replied instantly. He blinked. No one ever called him sir. Around here, people called him boss or sometimes just Tom. But Martha said it with such natural respect that he didn't even correct her. He just nodded and walked away, a little surprised. As the day went on, Martha didn't waste a second. She studied the layout of the warehouse, learned the codes on the boxes, and memorized how the inventory system worked. Every task she touched, she finished quickly and perfectly. When she lifted crates, she used her legs, not her back. When she checked numbers, she double-checked them. Her handwriting was sharp and clean, every letter straight like a soldier's note. She didn't talk much, but when she did, her voice was clear and steady. The others started whispering. "She's too serious," one man said. "Maybe she used to be in the army," another joked. "Yeah, maybe she got kicked out and now she's here counting boxes." Laughter followed. Martha didn't react. She heard them, she always did, but she kept her eyes on her work. Years in the military had taught her one thing. You don't answer disrespect with words. You answer it with discipline. At lunch, while everyone else crowded around the small canteen, laughing and chatting, Martha sat alone at a corner table. She had brought her own food, a simple sandwich and an apple. She ate quietly, then pulled out a small notebook and started writing. A younger worker, Jenny, passed by and asked curiously, "Hey, what are you writing?" "Just notes," Martha replied with a small smile. "I like keeping track of things." Jenny nodded awkwardly and walked away. The others teased her later for even talking to the soldier lady. But there was something about Martha that made people curious, even if they made fun of her. She never lost her patience. If someone needed help, she was the first to step in. If a crate was too heavy, she didn't wait for others. She lifted it herself, muscles tight, face calm. Once, a pallet nearly tipped over when a worker misjudged the balance. Martha rushed over and steadied it before it fell, saving a pile of equipment from breaking. Everyone watched silently, impressed, but no one said thank you. After work, while the others left early, Martha stayed behind to organize the tools. She lined them up neatly, just like soldiers line up their weapons. When she locked the storage room, she took one last walk around the depot, making sure everything was in its place. It wasn't her duty, but she did it anyway. Old habits, she thought. Some things never leave you. At home, her small apartment was just as orderly as her workspace. A single photo sat on the shelf, a picture of her in uniform, standing with a group of soldiers in a dusty field. Their smiles were tired but proud. She looked at it for a moment before turning off the light. That part of her life felt far away now, but she couldn't let it go completely. Wearing her old camo jacket was her quiet way of remembering who she had been, and who she still was inside. Back at the depot, the teasing continued the next day. Someone joked, "Hey, Sergeant, you gonna make us do push-ups if we're late?" Another shouted, "Ma'am, permission to take a coffee break?" The room laughed. Martha gave a small smile and said calmly, "Permission granted." Her tone was so serious that for a moment, they didn't know whether to laugh or salute. As the days passed, Martha's quiet presence started to make people uneasy in a different way. She didn't argue, didn't gossip, and didn't complain. But somehow, things ran smoother when she was around. Orders were processed faster. Mistakes were caught before they caused problems. Tools were never missing. Even the manager noticed that the depot felt more organized. Still, no one really knew who she was. To them, she was just a strange, strict woman who wore camo and acted like she ran the place. But to those who looked closely, there was something more. A calm strength in her eyes. A kind of silent authority that didn't come from pride but from experience. She wasn't trying to stand out. She just couldn't unlearn the discipline that had shaped her entire life. And while they laughed behind her back, Martha knew something they didn't. Real respect is never demanded. It's earned. One day she thought they'd see. She didn't know that day would come much sooner than anyone expected. The teasing started almost the very next week. At first, it was small, little jokes that didn't seem too cruel, just the kind people throw around when someone new joins the team. Martha Reeves was used to that. She'd faced tougher words and colder stares in her life. But in the warehouse, where most people worked with loud music and louder laughter, her quiet, disciplined nature stood out like a sore thumb. Every morning, she came in early, her uniform-like clothes spotless, her boots polished, and her face calm. She always greeted everyone with a polite good morning. But most people didn't reply seriously. "At ease, soldier," one of the men called out once, making everyone laugh. Martha just nodded slightly and went back to checking her list. It didn't matter to her, at least she tried to make it not matter. But it wasn't just the jokes. It was the way people talked when she passed by, the snickers, the whispers. "She thinks she's still in the army," one woman said under her breath. "Look at her. Walks like she's marching to war." Another man laughed and said, "Maybe she's gonna salute the coffee machine next." The laughter that followed echoed down the metal aisles of the warehouse. Martha heard all of it. Her hearing was still sharp, trained from years of listening for danger in faraway lands. But she kept her head down and her hands busy. She scanned barcodes, counted stock, fixed records that others ignored. If someone asked her for help, she did it without complaint. She worked like a machine, steady, fast, and focused. The others couldn't understand her. Why didn't she laugh at their jokes? Why didn't she talk about her weekend or gossip about coworkers? She never joined the group for lunch or after-work drinks. She didn't take smoke breaks. She didn't complain about the long hours or heavy lifting. She just worked with the same precision every day. And to some people, that was enough reason to dislike her. One afternoon, when the sun burned through the dusty windows and the air smelled of oil and sweat, one of the younger workers, Mike, decided to play a prank. He placed a toy soldier on Martha's workstation before she arrived. When she saw it, she paused for a moment. The tiny plastic soldier stood straight, holding a gun, its helmet slightly tilted. A faint smile touched Martha's lips. She didn't throw it away. She just picked it up, wiped the dust off it, and placed it neatly on the top shelf beside her files. That small reaction confused everyone. They expected her to get angry, maybe embarrassed. But she didn't give them the satisfaction. Her calmness made the others uneasy. It was like their jokes never reached her. But deep down, a small part of her did feel the sting. Not because of their words, she'd heard worse, but because she missed the kind of respect and teamwork that used to exist in her old life. In the army, everyone had each other's backs. Here, everyone only looked out for themselves. One day, a delivery truck came in 2 hours late, throwing off the entire day's schedule. The supervisor was yelling, people were confused, and paperwork was missing. Martha stepped in quietly, took the clipboard, and began sorting things out. She talked to the driver, checked the cargo, and within minutes, had the problem under control. Her calm voice and quick thinking turned chaos into order. When everything settled, the supervisor said, "Good work, Reeves. How'd you learn to handle that so fast?" Martha gave a small shrug. "Just experience, sir." But the workers watching her whispered again. She probably learned that in her pretend army days. Someone snorted, "Yeah, she probably played too many war games." Still, Martha said nothing. She just returned to her desk and started filing reports. Her silence began to earn her an odd kind of respect. Not open admiration, but quiet acknowledgement. Even the ones who mocked her noticed that the depot ran smoother when she was around. Mistakes that used to happen every week somehow stopped. Inventory always matched perfectly. It was as if she had an invisible system in her mind that kept everything running right. One evening, after most people had gone home, Jenny, the only one who occasionally spoke to Martha, stayed behind to finish some work. She watched as Martha cleaned up the sorting station. "You don't mind them making fun of you?" Jenny finally asked. Martha looked up from her clipboard and smiled softly. "No. People laugh at what they don't understand." Jenny hesitated. "So, you were really in the army?" Martha didn't answer right away. She wiped her hands with a cloth, placed her pen neatly beside the papers, and said quietly, "A long time ago." Then she gave a gentle nod and walked out, her boots echoing down the empty corridor. Jenny sat there for a moment, surprised by the weight in Martha's words. They weren't proud or defensive, just honest. That night, she looked up Martha's name online, and what she found shocked her. There really had been a Major Martha Reeves, a logistics officer who served overseas during disaster relief missions. But Jenny didn't tell anyone. She figured if Martha wanted people to know, she would tell them herself. The next morning, the jokes continued, as they always did. Mike joked about Major Boots again and the others laughed. But Jenny didn't join in this time. She just watched Martha, who was already busy organizing shipments, her focus unbroken, her movements calm and confident. There was something unshakable about her, something the others couldn't mock away. And though Martha kept her past hidden, it showed in everything she did, in her discipline, her respect, her quiet strength. The teasing would go on for now, but a day was coming when every one of those laughs would turn into silence. A day when the same people who mocked her would stand in awe and maybe even salute her. They just didn't know it yet. Rumors have a strange way of spreading, especially in a place where people work long hours and crave a little gossip to make the day interesting. By Martha Reeves' third week at the depot, her calm and mysterious nature had become the favorite topic of conversation. Nobody knew where she came from, who she lived with, or why she always wore the same faded camouflage jacket. She never bragged, never shared stories, and never joined anyone for lunch. That silence only made people more curious. One afternoon, while the workers were sitting in the break room, one of them, Mike, pulled out his phone. "Hey, I think I found something," he said with a grin. Everyone turned toward him. "There's an article here about some Major Martha Reeves. Served overseas. Logistics officer. Look." Jenny, who was sitting nearby, frowned. "You sure it's her?" Mike shrugged. "Same name, same age range. Even kind of looks like her in the picture, though she had short hair and a uniform. Says she coordinated supply lines during a war zone mission years ago." The room filled with chatter. "No way," someone laughed. "If she was really a major, what's she doing here pushing boxes?" "Maybe she messed up and got kicked out," another guessed. "Or maybe she's just pretending. You know how some people are." Martha wasn't around to hear them. She was in the back room, going through the day's shipment list, unaware of the little storm her name had started. By the time she came back to the main floor, the air felt different. People looked at her longer than usual. The teasing had stopped for the moment, replaced by a strange mix of curiosity and disbelief. But no one asked her directly. They just watched, waiting for her to give something away. Later that day, a small problem popped up. A delivery truck had arrived, but its paperwork was missing. The driver didn't know who to report to, and the supervisor, Mr. Henson, wasn't answering his phone. Workers began arguing about what to do. Some said to unload the cargo and figure it out later. Others said to send it back. The driver was frustrated and ready to leave. That's when Martha quietly stepped forward. "What's the shipment number?" she asked the driver. He showed her the manifest. She took one quick glance, then walked over to the computer. Her fingers moved fast on the keyboard, checking codes, locations, and supply entries. "This shipment isn't late," she said calmly. It's part of the emergency restock order. It needs to go into Bay 3, Section 4B. How do you know that? One of the men asked, confused. That order just came in this morning. Martha gave a faint smile. Because the date format on the manifest follows military logistics code. It's easy to recognize if you've worked with it before. Nobody replied. They just watched as she directed the unloading, making sure every crate went exactly where it needed to be. In 15 minutes, everything was done perfectly, something that usually took an hour with 3 people arguing. The driver thanked her and left, relieved. When Mr. Henson returned and heard what happened, he looked impressed. Good work, Reeves. You saved us a delay. Just doing my job, sir, she said quietly, going back to her desk. The others exchanged glances. Some were impressed, others annoyed. But they all knew one thing now. Martha wasn't just some random woman who liked to play soldier. She knew things that no ordinary warehouse worker would know. That evening, when most people left, Jenny stayed behind again. She had been thinking about the old article she'd seen and what Martha had done today. You really handled that like you'd done it 100 times, she said softly. Martha smiled faintly. Maybe I have. So it's true then? Jenny asked. You were in the army? Martha looked at her for a moment, her expression calm but distant. A long time ago, she said. Different world, different people. Jenny wanted to ask more, but Martha's tone made it clear that was all she would say. When Jenny told the others the next day, they didn't believe her. She's just saying that to sound mysterious, Mike scoffed. If she was really a major, she'd be somewhere important, not here. But something had changed. Even when they joked, their voices were quieter, less sure. The way Martha carried herself, the precision in her work, it all seemed to fit the story now. A few days later, another shipment arrived, this one much larger and full of mixed items. The warehouse was already behind schedule, and tensions were high. Martha stepped in again, not to take over, but to guide. She calmly explained how to separate items by priority, how to tag boxes so nothing got lost, and how to double-check manifests using color-coded systems. By the end of the day, everything was sorted, and the floor was spotless. Mr. Henson was so impressed that he told everyone, if you want to see how a real professional works, watch Reeves. That night, Martha sat alone in her small apartment. She looked at the same photo she always did. Her old unit standing together, smiling despite the dust and exhaustion. She remembered the long nights of planning, the convoys stuck in mud, the chaos that came with every mission. She remembered the sound of radios, the weight of command, and the countless lives that depended on her decisions. And now here she was, in a quiet warehouse, surrounded by people who didn't know her story. But she didn't blame them. She didn't need them to salute her or thank her. She only wanted to do her job right. That had always been her way. Back at the depot, the gossip started dying down. The workers didn't fully understand who Martha Reeves was, but they began to sense that there was something about her. Something real. A quiet strength. A sense of order. She never raised her voice, never showed off. But somehow, when things got messy, everyone looked toward her. They still didn't know the full story, not yet. But the whisper of her name, Major Reeves, had started to replace the laughter. And that was the beginning of the respect she had unknowingly earned. It was a hot and restless Thursday morning when everything started to go wrong. The depot had been running smoothly for weeks, thanks in large part to Martha Reeves' quiet efficiency. But that day, something unusual happened. The air outside felt heavy, the sky dull gray with a storm building in the distance. Most of the workers were busy joking and unloading supplies when suddenly, the phones started ringing non-stop. Mr. Henson, the depot supervisor, rushed out of his office, his face pale and sweaty. "Listen up, everyone," he shouted. "We've got an emergency situation nearby. A military convoy broke down just outside of town. They're stuck on Highway 47, carrying relief supplies for the flood-hit villages. The roads are half flooded, and communication lines are down." Everyone stopped what they were doing. A convoy? That meant soldiers, big trucks, and serious trouble. The depot had never dealt directly with the military before. "What are we supposed to do?" someone asked. Henson rubbed his forehead nervously. Regional Command just called. The convoy needs backup supplies and fuel from us, and fast. But the coordination system is down, and I can't reach their logistics team. If we mess this up, those people waiting for help won't get what they need. The room filled with uneasy murmurs. No one knew how to handle a military operation. The depot worked with civilian deliveries, not emergency convoys. We could just wait for instructions, Mike said carelessly. Let the army handle their own mess. But Henson shook his head. They're stuck in the flood zone. If we wait, the roads will close. We're their closest support center. Panic began to spread. Workers started talking over one another. Some grabbed phones, others checked files. Nobody knew what to do first. There were hundreds of supply crates, each labeled differently, and no one had the codes to match what the convoy needed. Time was ticking. The radio crackled again, a soldier's voice cutting through the static. This is Delta Convoy 2. We've got vehicles disabled. Repeat, we need logistics support immediately. Supplies are time-sensitive. Henson froze. His voice trembled as he said, We'll figure something out. Just hold tight. But it was clear he had no plan. That was when Martha, standing near the back of the room, finally spoke. Her voice was calm but firm. Sir, may I step in? Everyone turned toward her. For a second, the whole depot went silent. Martha walked closer, her boots clicking softly on the concrete floor. I've handled convoy coordination before, she said. If you'll allow me, I can take charge until the systems back up. Henson looked uncertain. Reeves, this isn't just sorting boxes. These are live military operations. I understand that, sir, she replied steadily. But if we don't act now, those supplies won't reach the people who need them. We can't wait for someone else to fix this. The way she spoke, so clear and confident, made everyone pause. Henson nodded slowly. All right, Reeves, do what you can. Martha immediately took control. She grabbed a clipboard, a radio, and one of the old route maps from the wall. She began asking sharp, direct questions. What vehicles do we have fueled and ready? What's our available inventory of food, medical, and fuel supplies? Who here can drive a heavy truck? The workers scrambled to answer. No one dared to joke now. Her voice had a tone that demanded focus, not through fear, but through respect. Within minutes, she divided the crew into small teams. One team started loading emergency rations. Another prepared spare tires and fuel drums. She told someone to recheck the terrain routes using the latest weather updates. It was like watching a commander in action. Fast, precise, and calm. Over the radio, the convoy leader's voice came through again, this time more desperate. This is Delta Convoy 2, we're losing light, and 2 of our trucks are still stuck in the mud. We need an ETA for backup. Martha picked up the radio. This is Logistics Depot 14, Major Reeves speaking, she said in a steady voice that none of her co-workers had ever heard before. We have your manifest. Support trucks are being loaded now. Estimated departure in 30 minutes. I repeat, 30 minutes. Hold position and maintain contact on this frequency. The warehouse fell silent. Everyone stared at her. The way she spoke, the authority in her voice, the confidence in her tone. She didn't sound like a warehouse worker anymore. She sounded like someone who'd led people through real emergencies before. She didn't waste a second. When the forklift stalled, she jumped in and started loading crates herself. When the driver hesitated about the route, she drew a quick plan on the back of a paper box. Her calm presence turned the chaos into order. Even Mike, who used to mock her the most, found himself following her instructions without question. By the time the trucks were loaded and ready, rain had started pouring down. Thunder rolled in the distance, and the roads outside were already slick with mud. Henson looked at her and said, Reeves, are you sure about this plan? She nodded. Yes, sir. The convoy's counting on us. We'll get it done. She climbed into the passenger seat of the lead support truck, radio in hand. Her co-workers stood by the gate, watching in silence as the convoy team prepared to leave. For the first time, no one saw her as the woman in camo. They saw her as someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Someone who didn't panic when things fell apart. The trucks rolled out into the storm, headlights cutting through the rain. Martha's voice came through the radio every few minutes, guiding the drivers, checking coordinates, keeping everyone steady. The others back at the depot listened in awe. The teasing, the jokes, the laughter, all of it was gone. In that moment, they realized something important. The woman they had mocked for weeks wasn't pretending to be a soldier. She had been one. And when the real test came, she was the only one who knew exactly what to do. The storm outside grew worse as the minutes passed. The wind howled through the metal walls of the depot, and rain beat against the windows like angry fists. Everyone inside could feel the tension. Radios buzzed with half-broken messages, and the workers moved nervously, unsure what to do next. Mr. Henson paced back and forth, mumbling about reports and orders, while others argued about whether they should call the regional office again. In the middle of all that noise, Martha Reeves stood completely still. Her eyes were fixed on the map spread across the table. The roads were flooding fast, and the stranded convoy still hadn't moved. If no help reached them soon, the relief supplies would never get to the flood victims. Every minute mattered. Finally, she looked up. "Sir," she said firmly, "let me handle this." The room went silent. Everyone turned to her. The woman they'd mocked for weeks, the one they called Major Boots and G.I. Jane, now stood there, calm but determined, like someone used to giving orders when things got serious. Henson blinked. "You?" he asked, unsure. "Reeves, this isn't just sorting boxes. We're talking about an actual convoy in trouble." "I know," she replied, "and I've dealt with worse." Her voice didn't shake. There was something in her eyes, focus, confidence, authority, that made everyone else stop doubting for a moment. Henson hesitated, then sighed. "All right, Reeves, you're in charge. Do whatever you think needs to be done." Without wasting a second, Martha took the radio and started talking to the convoy. "Delta Convoy 2, this is Depot 14, Major Reeves speaking. Can you read me?" Her tone was crisp and clear. The others in the room looked at each other, whispering, "Major?" Static filled the room for a few seconds before a soldier's voice came through. "Copy that, Major Reeves. We're reading you loud and clear. We're stuck near mile marker 22. 2 vehicles are disabled, and we're running low on diesel. Roads ahead are flooded. We need route guidance." Martha's fingers traced the map quickly. "Understood, Delta 2. Listen carefully," she said, her voice steady and commanding. "You'll reroute through Hill Creek Bypass. It's narrow but clear. I'll send backup trucks with supplies and fuel. Hold position until you receive confirmation. Do not attempt to cross the bridge. Repeat, do not cross." Her co-workers listened in stunned silence. She didn't stutter, didn't pause. It was like she'd been doing this all her life because she had. Then she turned to the rest of the team. "We need to move. Right now. I want 2 drivers ready in 5 minutes. Load the emergency fuel drums and medical crates from Section B. Double-check the waterproof covers. We can't afford to lose a single box." No one argued. Even Mike, who used to mock her the most, nodded and started moving crates. Jenny ran to get the keys. The whole depot came alive with energy, working together like never before. It was as if Martha's calm confidence had spread to everyone. When one of the drivers panicked about the heavy rain and the flooded road, Martha walked up to him and said quietly, "I know it looks bad, but we've handled worse in the field. Trust me, you'll be fine if you stick to the plan." Her words were steady, reassuring. The man nodded, feeling braver just hearing her tone. She climbed onto the loading platform, checking every strap and seal herself. "Secure everything twice," she said. "If the road gives us trouble, we won't have time to fix mistakes." Her sleeves were soaked, and rain dripped from her hair, but she didn't seem to notice. Inside the depot, the radio crackled again. "Delta 2 to Depot 14, we're losing time, Major. Storm's getting worse." "Copy that," Martha replied. "Help is on the way. Stay on frequency and keep your headlights low." When everything was ready, she handed Henson the radio. "Keep this channel open. If anything changes, call me immediately. He looked at her with new respect. Reeves, you sure you should go out there? She smiled faintly. If I give orders, I should be there to see them through. As she walked toward the trucks, the workers watched her with a mix of awe and guilt. They had laughed at her for weeks. Laughed at her boots, her posture, her silence. But now they saw the truth. She wasn't playing soldier. She was one. Every movement, every command, every decision proved it. The lead truck's headlights cut through the pouring rain as Martha climbed into the passenger seat. She grabbed the radio microphone again. All units, this is Major Reeves. Follow my lead and maintain distance. Let's bring those supplies home. The trucks rolled out of the depot, their engines roaring against the storm. The workers stood near the gate, watching the convoy disappear into the darkness. The rain kept falling, thunder growled, but Martha's voice over the radio was steady as ever. Convoy support in motion. ETA 40 minutes. Inside the depot, Henson exhaled slowly. That woman, he muttered. She's something else. Jenny nodded. Yeah, she said softly. She's the real deal. Out on the road, Martha's calm voice guided the drivers through flooded lanes and slippery turns. Slow down by 2 miles, she ordered. Keep right. The bridge ahead is weak. Divert left through the dirt path. Every word she spoke came from years of training. Every instinct from experience earned in far harsher conditions. By the time they reached the stranded convoy, night had fully fallen. The soldiers waiting there were drenched, cold, and exhausted. When the backup trucks pulled up, they ran forward to help unload supplies. A young lieutenant approached the lead vehicle, saluted sharply, and said, "Ma'am, thank you. We didn't think anyone would reach us in time." Martha stepped out into the rain and returned the salute. "Just doing my job, Lieutenant," she said softly. Back at the depot, her co-workers listened as the radio message came through. The convoy was safe, and the mission was complete. For a long time, no one spoke. They just stood there, realizing that the quiet woman they had teased had just saved an entire relief mission. And as the rain continued to fall outside, one thing became clear to everyone. Martha Reeves wasn't just a worker in Camo. She was a leader who never forgot who she was, even when everyone else did. Rain was still falling the next morning when the sound of engines echoed through the depot yard. Everyone looked up from their work, confused at first. It wasn't the usual delivery trucks. These were larger, heavier, and covered in mud. The deep hum of diesel engines and the flashing military headlights made everyone stop what they were doing. Through the mist and drizzle, a military convoy rolled into view. 6 trucks, all painted in olive green, came slowly down the road and pulled up right outside the depot gates. Soldiers jumped out, their boots splashing in puddles, their uniforms soaked but tidy. They moved quickly and with purpose, just like Martha Reeves always did. The workers gathered by the windows, whispering among themselves. "What's going on?" someone asked. "Are those the same guys from yesterday?" Another added, "Why are they here?" Inside, Mr. Henson came out of his office looking completely lost. "Did anyone call them?" he asked, but no one answered. Then the soldiers started walking toward the entrance. Their leader, a tall man in his 30s with a radio on his shoulder, looked around, scanning the place carefully. The moment he spotted Martha, his entire expression changed. Without a second thought, he stepped forward and gave a sharp salute. The sound of his boots clicking together echoed across the floor. "Major Reeves, ma'am," he said loudly, his voice clear and full of respect. "Orders fulfilled as directed. Convoy successfully delivered to the flood zone. We've come to report completion." The room went completely silent. You could hear the rain hitting the roof. Every single worker froze in place. Their eyes darted from the soldier to Martha, the same woman they had teased for weeks, the one they called the army lady, the wannabe soldier, the one playing dress-up. Martha stood there quietly, not surprised at all. She returned the salute smoothly, like it was second nature. "Good work, Lieutenant," she replied. "How's the situation at the site?" "Stable, ma'am," he said. "Supplies have been distributed. Locals are safe." Couldn't have done it without your coordination. The other soldiers nodded in agreement. One of them added, "We heard your voice through the storm all night. You kept us going, ma'am." The warehouse workers watched in disbelief. A few mouths hung open. Mike, the one who had mocked her the most, stood frozen with a wrench in his hand. Jenny had tears in her eyes. For the first time, everyone was seeing Martha as she truly was. Not a quiet, strange woman in camo, but a leader, a soldier, someone who had earned respect the hard way. Mr. Henson finally found his voice. "Major Reeves?" he stammered. You're actually—" "Yes, sir," she said gently, almost embarrassed. "Retired Major Martha Reeves, U.S. Army Logistics Division." The soldiers started unloading several crates from their trucks, emergency equipment and supplies they had borrowed from the depot during the operation. "Returning borrowed stock, ma'am," one of them said, handing her a signed report. She took it and nodded, her face calm but proud. It was a moment no one in that warehouse would ever forget. The same woman who quietly swept the floor, organized papers, and ate alone during lunch was now being saluted by trained soldiers. The same woman everyone had joked about had just directed a life-saving operation that even professionals might have failed to pull off. As the soldiers packed up their gear, one of them noticed the small toy soldier sitting on Martha's shelf, the one Mike had placed there as a joke weeks ago. The soldier smiled and said, "You've still got your mascot, huh, ma'am?" Martha laughed softly. "Yeah," she said. "Reminds me not to take things too seriously." That small moment made everyone realize just how humble she was. Even after everything, the teasing, the jokes, the disrespect, she held no anger. She didn't look down on anyone. She just smiled and kept moving. After the soldiers finished their formalities, the lieutenant turned to her again. "If you don't mind, ma'am, the colonel asked me to pass along his gratitude. He said your name still carries weight where it matters." Martha gave a polite nod. "Tell him I said thank you. I'm glad we could help." When the convoy finally drove away, the yard went quiet again. But the silence this time wasn't from confusion. It was from respect. The workers didn't know what to say. For a long moment no one moved. Then Jenny walked over to Martha and said softly, "You really were a major." Martha smiled kindly. "Once upon a time," she said. "Now I'm just part of the team." But everyone knew she wasn't just anything anymore. That day had changed everything. Even Mike stepped forward, scratching his head awkwardly. "Hey, Martha," he said, trying to find the right words. "I guess we owe you an apology." Martha looked at him with the same calm expression she always had. "No need," she said simply. "We all have things we don't understand until we see them for ourselves." For the rest of the day, the warehouse felt different. The laughter was quieter, but the respect was louder. People worked more carefully, followed her lead, and even started calling her ma'am out of genuine admiration, not mockery. Mr. Henson made sure everyone knew what she had done. "You all saw it yourselves," he said proudly. "That's what real leadership looks like." That evening, when the last truck left and the depot lights dimmed, Martha stood by the gate, watching the muddy tire tracks left behind by the convoy. The air smelled of rain and diesel. She felt tired but peaceful. For years, she had stayed quiet about her past, thinking it didn't matter anymore. But now she realized that sometimes, the world has a way of reminding you who you are. Not to show off, but to help others remember what true strength looks like. As she turned off the lights and locked the depot door, she smiled to herself. The soldiers had called her Major Reeves again, but that wasn't what mattered most. What mattered was that, for the first time in a long while, she felt seen. Not for her uniform, but for the person she had always been underneath it. Steady, brave, and quietly proud. The next morning, the storm had passed. The sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days, shining on the wet ground and turning every puddle into a mirror. The depot looked cleaner, brighter, almost as if it too had been washed of all the doubts and gossip that once filled it. Workers moved around quietly, still a little dazed from what they had witnessed the day before. Martha arrived early just like always. Her uniform, simple camo pants and a faded green jacket, looked the same, but to everyone else, she suddenly seemed different. When she walked in, people straightened up without even realizing it. The teasing, the whispers, the laughter, all gone. Now, wherever she went, eyes followed her with quiet respect. Jenny was the first to greet her. "Morning, Major," she said with a shy smile. Martha chuckled softly. "Just Martha today, please," she replied, setting her lunchbox on the table. But there was warmth in her voice. She wasn't trying to distance herself. She was trying to make them comfortable again. Even Mike, who had once been the loudest critic, now seemed unsure how to act. He kept glancing at her, as if looking for the right moment to speak. Finally, during a coffee break, he walked over, rubbing the back of his neck. Hey, Martha," he began. "Listen, about before, all the jokes, the stupid stuff I said, I didn't know. I mean, none of us did. You really saved those people, didn't you?" Martha looked at him kindly. "I didn't save anyone alone," she said. "The whole team helped. You all packed the supplies, checked the vehicles, loaded the fuel. That made the mission possible." Mike frowned. "Still, you were the one who led them. That takes guts." She smiled faintly, looking down at her coffee. Guts aren't about shouting orders or being tough. Sometimes, it's just about staying calm when everything goes wrong. That simple sentence stuck in his mind. For the first time, he understood that real strength didn't always roar. Sometimes, it spoke quietly and confidently, like Martha did. Later that day, a local news van pulled up outside the depot. The regional emergency management team had sent them to document the supply operation. A reporter stepped out, carrying a microphone, and asked to speak with Major Reeves. The word spread quickly, the warehouse was going to be on the news. Everyone gathered around, pretending to work while sneaking glances at the camera crew. The reporter, a young woman with a bright smile, shook Martha's hand. "Ma'am, your coordination helped save hundreds of people during the flood," she said. "Can you tell us how you managed it?" Martha hesitated for a moment, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. She wasn't used to the spotlight. "Honestly," she said softly, "it wasn't about me. We just did what needed to be done. When you see people in danger, you don't wait for someone else to fix it. You act." The reporter smiled. "Were you in the military before?" "Yes," Martha admitted. "A long time ago. I was part of logistics, organizing transport, coordinating teams, making sure supplies got where they were needed. I guess those habits don't go away." Her coworkers watched from a distance, amazed by how natural she sounded. There was no arrogance, no bragging, just quiet pride and humility. When the interview ended, the reporter shook her hand again and said, "The world could use more people like you, Major." As the news van drove away, everyone clapped softly. For the first time, the applause wasn't teasing or playful. It was real. Martha blushed a little and waved her hands, embarrassed. All right, she said with a laugh. "Back to work before Henson catches us slacking." But Henson was standing nearby, smiling proudly. "You know, Reeves," he said, "I think you've given this place something we were missing, heart." That afternoon, the atmosphere in the depot changed completely. People worked together with more care, more purpose. Even small tasks like loading crates or sealing boxes felt meaningful. It was as if Martha's courage had lit a fire in everyone else. During lunch, a few workers asked her questions about her time in the army. She didn't tell war stories or dramatic tales. Instead, she shared lessons. How teamwork mattered more than rank, how even the smallest job could save lives, and how real discipline wasn't about fear but about respect. Her stories weren't about fighting. They were about surviving, adapting, and never giving up on others. Jenny listened closely and asked, "So why did you leave, Martha? You could have stayed and gone higher in rank." Martha paused, then smiled. "Because sometimes you serve long enough to realize your duty doesn't end with the uniform. You just find new ways to keep helping." That line stayed in everyone's mind long after the conversation ended. When evening came, the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. The workers finished early that day, And before leaving, several of them walked up to Martha to thank her. Not just for saving the convoy, but for reminding them what leadership really meant. As the depot emptied, Martha stayed behind to check the final inventory logs. The quiet hum of the generator and the soft rustle of papers were the only sounds. She took a deep breath, feeling content. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like an outsider. Before locking up, she walked outside and looked down the road where the convoy had disappeared 2 days ago. The mud tracks were drying, and the smell of rain still lingered in the air. She thought about the soldiers, the people who received the supplies, and the team that had stood by her side when it mattered most. A small smile touched her lips. She whispered to herself, "We did it." Then she turned back toward the depot, her new post, her new mission. The uniform might have changed, the battlefield might have been different, but her heart was still that of a soldier. Quiet, strong, always ready when duty called. What none of them knew yet was that the story of the woman in camo, the one everyone laughed at, was only beginning to spread beyond those depot walls. And soon, her courage would inspire far more people than she could ever imagine. A few days later, the depot returned to its normal rhythm. Trucks coming and going, workers shouting directions, machines humming. But something had changed forever. The air felt lighter, more respectful. People worked harder, spoke kinder, and carried themselves with a new sense of pride. And at the heart of it all was Martha Reeves, the woman in camo they had once laughed at but now quietly admired. Since the convoy mission, her story had spread through the town like wildfire. The local newspaper printed an article titled, "Former Army Major Leads Daring Flood Relief Operation." Her picture, standing in front of the depot with her sleeves rolled up and mud on her boots, was on the front page. Even people who didn't know her personally started visiting the depot just to thank her. At first, Martha didn't know how to handle all the attention. She was used to quiet corners, not flashing cameras or public praise. When people came up to shake her hand, she smiled politely, but deep down, she felt shy. She hadn't done it for glory. She had done it because it was the right thing to do. Still, it warmed her heart to see how inspired others felt. One morning, as she walked into work, she noticed something new hanging on the wall near the entrance. A framed photo of the convoy team. Someone had added a small plaque underneath that read, "In honor of Major Martha Reeves, for showing us that true leadership never fades." She stopped for a moment and stared at it. Jenny and Mike came up behind her, smiling proudly. "We thought you deserved a place on the wall," Jenny said. "For what you did, for who you are." Martha turned to them, her eyes soft. "You didn't have to do this," she said quietly. Mike chuckled. "Maybe not. But we wanted to. You changed this place, Martha. Before you came, we just worked here. Now we believe in what we do." That meant more to her than any medal she'd ever received. She looked at the photo again, the soldiers standing in the rain, the convoy behind them, and her own muddy uniform. It wasn't just a picture. It was a reminder that even ordinary days could turn extraordinary when someone chose to act with courage. Later that week, the colonel himself, the one who had sent the convoy, visited the depot. His arrival caused quite a stir. Workers stood straighter. Even Henson looked nervous. When the colonel entered, he walked directly to Martha and saluted her sharply. "Major Reeves," he said with a proud smile. "You haven't changed a bit." Martha laughed softly. "I've changed plenty, sir. But I'm glad I could still help." He handed her a small envelope. Inside was a certificate of recognition, signed by the regional command. It wasn't an official military award, but it carried deep meaning. "For exceptional leadership and service to community," it read. Everyone in the room clapped as she accepted it. She didn't say much, just thanked the colonel and smiled modestly. After he left, Henson walked up to her. "Reeves," he said with a grin, "you're going to make it hard for the rest of us to keep up." She laughed. "You already are. Look around, we've all stepped up." From that day onward, Martha became more than just an employee. She became the backbone of the depot. The one people turned to when things went wrong. The one whose calm voice could settle any chaos. One afternoon, a new recruit joined the team. A young woman fresh out of college, nervous and clumsy. The others were patient, but she kept making mistakes and started crying quietly by the storage racks. Martha noticed and walked over. "Hey," she said softly. "First days are always rough. I used to mess up too." The girl sniffled. You're perfect. Everyone talks about how brave you are." Martha smiled warmly. "Bravery isn't about never failing. It's about getting back up every time you do." Those simple words comforted the girl more than any lecture could. And that was Martha's gift. She didn't lead with noise or pride. She led with kindness and example. Weeks passed, and the depot became known across the region for its efficiency and teamwork. The same people who once worked lazily now treated every shipment as if lives depended on it, because Martha had taught them that sometimes they actually did. Then one Friday evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the team gathered for a small surprise party. Jenny brought a cake, Mike handled decorations, and even Henson made a short speech. "To Martha," he said, raising his cup, "for reminding us that leadership isn't about rank, it's about heart." Everyone cheered, and Martha, laughing shyly, said, "You'll make me cry if you keep talking like that." That night, as she walked home under the streetlights, she felt peaceful. The world had tested her, misunderstood her, and doubted her. But in the end, she had proven that true worth doesn't need to be shouted. It just needs to be shown. She paused by the roadside where the convoy had once gotten stuck. The road was dry now, the mud gone, and the air smelled fresh after days of sunshine. She closed her eyes for a moment and whispered, "We did good," and deep inside, she felt that quiet strength again. The same strength that had carried her through battlefields, storms, and lonely nights. She wasn't just a soldier or a worker. She was a symbol of resilience, a reminder that courage doesn't fade when the uniform comes off. It lives on in every act of service, every helping hand, every choice to stand firm when it matters. Back at the depot, the framed photo caught the evening light, glowing softly on the wall. Beneath it, the plaque gleamed like gold. Everyone who passed by couldn't help but stop for a moment, remembering the woman in camo, the one they had once laughed at, but who ended up teaching them the meaning of respect, duty, and quiet heroism. And so, the story of Major Martha Reeves became something more than just a workplace tale. It became a lesson that greatness often hides in plain sight, wearing simple clothes, speaking softly, and waiting patiently for the moment when the world finally learns to listen.